Hey guys, welcome to my channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei Reborn by Ddraig. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like and also share this video to your friends. Let's start the video. Issei, run while you still see. A woman's voice screamed at a child that was standing in front of her, but she was cut off by a sword, slitting her throat open. The woman made a few gagging noises, but she eventually stopped breathing. "No, mother," the boy that the woman called Issei shouted, tears streaming down his eyes. The man that killed his mother and father soon turned his attention towards the small boy and gave a wicked grin. "Well boy, it seems that you will be joining your parents as well, but I'll make sure that you remember my name, make sure that you never forget my name," the man said, standing tall with two black fatherly wings on his back. Issei couldn't say anything nor could he move. He couldn't believe that at 7 years of age, he would meet his end. "My name is Kokabiel, make sure you remember that in the afterlife," the man known as Kokabiel said, raising his sword in the air. Issei closed his eyes and waited for the impact. He felt a sharp pain on the right side of his face. Issei screamed like he has never screamed before. He was holding his right eye, so he could try and stop the bleeding. Kokabiel then kicked the bow in the stomach, sending him across the room. Issei's back smashed on a nearby wall. Still alive, for a human, you don't die as easily, but that doesn't matter, I'll end your life now," Kokabiel said, approaching the fallen Issei. Issei could only watch as his death came closer and closer. Issei's life began flashing before his eyes, to the friends he made in school, to the grateful moments that he spent with his parents and the rest of the Hudu family. Kokabiel stood before the fallen boy. He grabbed him by the throat and pulled him up to his feet. Issei began choking by the sheer power behind Kokabiel's grip. Kokabiel then let go of Issei's neck. Before Issei's feet could touch the ground, Kokabiel decapitated Issei. Issei's severed head fell on the cold floor with a small thud, the same with his body. Kokabiel smirked at his handiwork and laughed. He then disappeared. Young one," a voice said within Issei's head. Issei's eyes snapped open and he found himself surrounded by flames. He looked up and saw what looked like to be a giant red dragon. "Who are you?" Issei asked weakly. "I go by the name of the Red Dragon Emperor, but since you are my new host, you can call me Ddraig," the giant dragon said. What do you mean by new host?" Issei asked. "I do not have much time to explain it to you. Right now I shouldn't be awake. I didn't usually do this with my previous hosts, but I'm willing to give you a second chance in life," Ddraig said. You can bring me back to life? How?" Issei asked. "With a little bit of magic, of course, but it will come with a price. I am willing to bring you back to life, only if you give up your humanity. If I bring you back to life, you will no longer be human, but a hybrid of human and dragon," Ddraig said. "So all I have to do, is give up my humanity?" Issei asked. Ddraig nodded. Issei looked around the area that he was in, but there was nothing but flames. He then turned back to Ddraig. I accept, I'll give up my humanity," Issei said. Ddraig nodded once more. Everything around them began to light up into a bright light. Issei shielded his eyes, but everything went black. 10 years later, Issei's eyes snapped open from his nightmare. He put a hand on his forehead and noticed that he was sweating. He pulled the blanket that was covering his body back and sat down on his bed, his face in his hands. He gave a long sigh. The same nightmare, coming back to haunt him every single night. It never let him find peace, neither do the voices in his head. The voices were screaming the same thing every single time. "Issei, run as fast as you see. Remember my name in the afterlife. My name is Kokabiel." Issei gave a silent growl at the name of Kokabiel. He forced the voice to go quiet and he stood up from the bed. He exited his room and went straight to the bathroom. He stripped out of his clothes and entered the bath. When he was finished, he wore his school uniform. Before he exited the bathroom, he took a glance at the mirror. He ran a finger at the scar that ran across his right eye. His right eye was now blind, losing its natural brown color and went to a light milky blue color. He then ran a finger at another scar that was on his neck, the scar that was formed when he was put back together by Ddraig. Issei sighed once more. He exited his bathroom and went downstairs to the kitchen. He made himself a bowl of rice with some orange juice. In a matter of seconds, Issei finished his breakfast. He put the glass and the bowl in the sink. He then went over to the living room and picked up his school bag. He had to thank his uncle. He was the one that enrolled him into the Whai Academy, which was previously an all-girls school. His uncle also told them that he didn't like to talk very much, so the teacher will introduce him. Issei took his spare key into his pocket and exited his house. He locked the door and made his way to the Whai Academy. He honestly didn't know what to expect. It's been 10 years since he's been to school, 10 years since the incident, 10 years of being nothing but an empty shell. During the past few years, he even wondered as to why he decided to live. Why did he ask Ddraig to revive him as a hybrid? Why didn't he choose to live his life in the afterlife with his parents? The answer is obvious, of course. He wanted revenge. He made a vow that if he finds Kokabiel, he will rip his head out, and it was something that he was surely going to do, once he gets the chance. He looked to his left and saw a sign say Whai Academy. He went past the gates and headed for the entrance to the school. He then saw a teacher with purple dark hair and dark purple lipstick, waiting at the entrance. Once she saw him, she walked towards him. "Are you Hudu, Issei?" the woman asked. Issei nodded. I have been waiting for you. I am your teacher, Ms. Keiko. If you would please follow me and I will show you where your classroom is. I will also get a student to give you a full tour of the school later on," Ms. Keiko said. Issei nodded in understanding and followed Ms. Keiko inside the building. Once he entered, he made quite a first impression. All the people that were present were staring at him, specifically the scar on his eye. He closed his one eye and just ignored the stares and the whispers. Ms. Keiko stopped in front of the staff room. "Wait here, I have to get my stuff for the class," Ms. Keiko said, entering the staff room. Issei sighed and leaned back against the wall. He then heard footsteps coming towards him. He looked towards the sound and saw two students walling towards him. One was bald and had his eyes closed while the other wore a pair of shady-looking glasses. They were both approaching Issei with smirks. "So, I hear that you're the transfer student. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Motohama," Motohama said while pushing his glasses up. "And my name is Matsuda," Matsuda said while opening his eyes. "And we are the perverted duo," they both said loudly, earning a couple of dirty looks from girls. Issei raised a brow at the two. He honestly could care less about who they were, but he knew something. They must be the two most hated people in this school, especially by the girls. Now, you may be asking yourself, why did these two approach me? Quite simple really. We want you to join us. Together, we will forge upon a new name, called the Perverted Trio, Motohama finished loudly again. Issei looked at a few people that were watching the situation. A lot of the girls were shaking their heads at him, as if saying, please don't join them, while a few male students were nodding their heads, saying for him to join. But the answer was already clear for Issei. He looked at the two and shook his head. "So, you don't want to join us, eh?" Motohama said, with his head down. "Oh well, one day you'll find it in your heart that the decision you made today was wrong and you'll come running back at us, pleading to join our group," Motohama said, confident in his words. Matsuda agreed with him with a smirk of his own. "Matsuda, Motohama, you two get to class right." Ms. Keiko was cut off by Issei, who put a finger on his lips and shushed her. Ms. Keiko looked at Issei with a curious expression. Issei then turned his attention at the perverted duo. Both of them just stared at him, not knowing what he was about to do. Issei glared at the two, which made them back off a bit. When Issei took a step forward, they took a step back. Hey buddy, what are you going to do?" Motohama asked, scared by the glare that he was receiving from Issei. Issei said nothing as he continued to approach them. Finally, they remembered that if anything happened, it was still 2 against 1. Both of them smirked and stopped taking steps back. "You do realize that it's 2 versus 1 right here, don't ya?" Matsuda said with a smirk. Issei then grabbed both of them from their throats and lifted them up from the ground, choking them. The students that were present were watching the scene with awe and shock by the power of the transfer student. Issei kept his glare on while choking the life out of the two boys. They both started to turn blue from the lack of oxygen and were about to pass out. "Hudo Issei, that is enough, you can let them go," Ms. Keiko said. Issei turned and faced her. With a small sigh, he let the perverted duo to live. They both fell to their knees, gasping for air while coughing heavily. "All right man, we get you, we won't mess with you ever again," they both said as they ran away from Issei. Issei then turned his head towards Ms. Keiko. She gave a small sigh herself. "Even though I didn't approve of your way, I think this will tone those two perverts down a little. Also, try to avoid getting into fights, especially in school," she said. "Come now, let's get to class, the bell is about to." She was cut off by the sound of the bell going off. "Go off," she finished with a sigh. They both went to the second floor and walked down the corridor. After a few seconds, they stopped at a classroom with the sign "2B" on it. Ms. Keiko turned to look at Issei. "Okay, you wait out here, I'll call you in a minute," Ms. Keiko said. Issei nodded. Ms. Keiko opened the door to the classroom and closed it. Issei waited until his cue to enter. "Today, I would like to announce that we have a new student. You can enter now," Ms. Keiko shouted. Issei opened the door and walked in the classroom. He heard some whispers about him, like how he handled the perverted duo and about the 2 scars that were visible on his neck and face. Ms. Keiko cleared her throat, making the students to stop whispering. "All right class, his name ID Hudo Issei. He is 17 years old. The reason that I'm doing the introduction is because he rarely speaks. I would like you all to take care of him, and please don't go asking him about how he got his scars. He won't answer you, even if you tried," Ms. Keiko finished. "All right Issei, you can sit besides AOI. AOI, raise your hand," Ms. Keiko commanded the girl known as AOI. A girl in the back put her hand up. She had brown hair with green eyes. Issei saw her and walked towards the empty desk at the back, near the window, typical main anime character getting the sit near the window cliché. "All right everyone, take out your history books and turn to page 47, began Ms. Keiko. Issei took out his history book and opened it to page 47. He then looked out the window, already bored. He just wanted the day to end. Chapter 2. The Devils Approaching the Loner and the First Fallen. The bell for lunch rang not too long ago. Issei was the first one to get up. He exited the classroom and went towards the bathroom. He knew where it was, since he passed it during the time when him and Ms. Keiko were going to the staff room. He entered the bathroom and opened of the sinks. He splashed some water in his face and then looked at his reflection in the mirror. His reflection began to change into another figure.
The figure had long black hair, a pale face and red eyes, with a smirk across his lips.
"Remember my name is Kokabiel, Kokabiel, Kokabiel." The kokabiel illusion kept saying his name again and again. Issei growled and punched the mirror, shattering it. He noticed that there were a few pieces of blood on the mirror, so he looked at his knuckles. There was a small cut on his hand. Issei sighed and licked the wound, cleaning it. The blood soon stopped. Issei exited the bathroom and headed towards the canteen. Once entering, he noticed that every table was taken, so his best choice was to eat outside or in his classroom. He decided to eat outside, since he liked the peace and quiet. He paid for his lunch, which was only 2 pieces of white bread. He exited the building and sat down by the nearest tree. He opened his first white bread and took a bite. His opinion on the school right now was pretty alright, despite a few annoying people here and there, like those 2 in the morning. He opened his second white bread. Before he could take a bite, he felt like someone was watching him. He looked in front of him and saw a small girl, sitting in the grass. From what Issei could tell, she had white hair with 2 cat clips on her. Once the girl realized that she was watching him, she stood up and walked away. Issei shrugged and continued to eat his lunch. He found it a little weird that she was staring at him, but he didn't care that much. Once he finished his seconds, he lied down on the grass and stared up at the clouds. He gave a small sigh of relief. Peace and quiet, just how he liked it. He then felt his eyelids beginning to close. As much as he didn't want to see the same nightmare over and over again, his urge to sleep was bigger. He fell into a deep slumber. At the old school building, and, checkmate, looks like it's another lose for you, Akeno, a redhead said with a smile. My, it seems I can't beat you at a game of chess. Rias, how are you so good at it? Akeno asked with the same smile. Concentration, a good strategy and years of practice, Rias said. Do you think that you could give me some pointers in case of a rematch? Akeno asked. A master tends to keep his secrets. If you want to get good, then learn how to play the game, Rias said with a small smirk. Ah, Rias, that was mean, Akeno said with a smile on her face. Just then, the door opened and in stepped a short girl with white hair and gold eyes. I'm back, President Rias, the girl said in a monotone voice. How does the transfer student seem to you, Kaneko? Does he pose a threat? Rias asked. He looks like he is about to snap, but other than that, I don't think he's a threat, Kaneko said. Keep on monitoring him. I feel like at some point, he might prove a valuable ally or a very dangerous foe, Rias said with a hand on her chin. Kaneko nodded and headed towards the exit. Rias stopped her. Kaneko, one more thing, I feel like the fallen angels may have taken an interest towards him. Follow him on his way home and see if a fallen approaches him, Rias said.
Kaneko nodded once more and exited the room. My Rias, it seems like you have taken an interest in the boy, Akeno said with a smile.
Yes, I feel like he's special, Rias said. Akeno said nothing and they both started playing a new game of chess. Back with Issei, Issei snapped his eyes open and leaned forwards. He was breathing heavily with sweat running down his forehead. He wiped his sweat on his shirt and stood up. He turned around to leave, but collided with someone. The girl fell to the ground, but Issei was still standing. He looked down and saw that the girl had long black hair and her eyes were violet. I'm sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going, the girl said. Issei didn't say anything, like usual, but he did offer his hand to the girl. The girl looked at his hand and hesitantly took it. Issei picked her up. Thank you, she said shyly. Issei nodded and started walking towards the entrance of the school. Wait, the girl shouted. Issei turned around and looked at her with a raised brow. You might not know me, but I do know you. I see you crossing the bridge on your way home. Your name is Issei, right? The girl asked. Issei looked at her suspiciously, but nodded his head slowly. My name is Yuma Amano, pleasure to meet you, she said with a small bow. Issei nodded once more and turned around. She stopped him again. Wait, I have something to ask you, she shouted. Issei sighed in irritation and turned to look at the Yuma once more. Would you ever consider going on a date with me tomorrow? Yuma asked with a small blush on her face. Issei stood there thinking for a moment. Eventually, Issei shook his head. Why not? Are you busy tomorrow? She asked. Issei nodded once more. Then how about when school ends, let's walk home together, she asked a little desperate. Issei sighed once more. There was no way she was going to take a no for an answer. Issei nodded his head. Ah really, thank you very much, see you when school ends, meet me at the entrance, Yuma said as she started to run inside the school. Issei sighed and did the same. He went to the second floor and entered the classroom, and just when the bell rang, he sat on his chair and waited for the Ms. Keiko to enter. After school, once classes ended, Issei put his books inside his bag and exited the classroom. He was one of the last ones to leave the classroom. He walked down the stairs and was met with Yuma. Hello Issei, are you ready to go? She asked him. Issei nodded. They both exited the school gates and took a right. They were both walking in silence, the sound of their breathing enough for Issei. Partner, you know that she's a fallen, right? Ddraig asked his partner. Issei nodded mentally. Good, she may have some information on him, just be on your guard, Ddraig said, falling back to sleep for the time being. Suddenly, Yuma stopped walking. Issei kept walking, but turned around once he noticed that she wasn't walking next to him. "Issei, can I ask you something important?" Yuma asked while slowly walking towards him. Issei nodded. Once she was close enough, she leaned towards his ear. "Can you die for me?" she whispered in his ear. Issei wasn't shocked by her question. He expected her to ask him sooner or later, but he decided to play for a little while and nodded his head. Yuma gave an evil smirk and her school uniform began to disappear, replaced by a short black dress with a small, light purple jacket on top. 2 feathery wings came out of her back. "Good, this makes it easier for me. Any last words before you die, Issei?" she asked with an evil laugh. Issei put a hand on his chin and pretended to think. He then shook his head. "Oh well, goodbye Issei, may you rot in the darkest pits of the underworld," she said while forming a light spear in her left hand. "One last thing, my name is Rainier. I used Yuma as a fake one to get around," she said. She then threw the spear, which successfully impaled Issei in the chest. "Ha ha ha ha, Kokabiel will be happy with this," Rainier said, laughing. Once she looked at Issei, she noticed something strange. The light spear she threw impaled him in the chest, but he was still standing. Suddenly, Issei grabbed the spear and pulled it out of his chest. He looked at it for a small while, before throwing it to the side. It instantly disappeared. What? I killed you. How are you still standing?" Rainier asked in shock, but she soon put another smirk and summoned another spear in her hand. "No matter, this one will kill you for sure," she said as she threw it at him. This one hit him in the shoulder, but like the previous one, he pulled it out. "How are you still alive, you worthless human?" Rainier asked in anger and shock. She threw 2 more spears, one hitting him in the abdomen and the other hitting him in his stomach. Like the previous 2, he pulled them out and threw them aside. What the hell are you? You're not human," Rainier screamed. Issei grew tired of the situation. He slowly started to approach Rainier. "Stay where you are," she screamed as she threw even more light spears, but didn't manage to hit her target. "Enough of this, I'll see you again, you human worm," she said as she took flight. "Phew, thank Azazel that I managed to get away from that, whatever he was," Rainier said to herself. For some reason, she stopped going forward, even though her wings were flapping. She also felt something grab her legs. She turned around and saw Issei, with a pair of 2 red wings on his back and a red dragon gauntlet on his right hand. "Why you're a dragon?" Rainier screamed. Issei then turned around and looked at the road. He then threw Rainier back down. Once she made contact with the road, a large crater was formed. She tried to stand up, but Issei put his foot on her back, preventing her from getting up. Issei then grabbed both of her wings and began to pull them. "No, please, not my wings. I'll do anything, just please don't pull them off," Rainier pleaded, but her pleads fell on deaf ears. Issei began to pull harder, while Rainier's screams filled his own pleasure. He then stopped pulling for a second, pulling them suddenly that they teared of her back. Rainier screamed in pain as she began rolling on the ground. Issei then grabbed her hair and pulled her back to where he was. He held her head in place so that she was looking directly in his eyes. "Rainier, if you value your life, you will answer to this one simple question. If you say what we need to hear, we'll let you go, but if you give us a wrong answer, then Issei will have no other choice but to kill you. The question is, where is Kokabiel hiding?" Ddraig said from the gauntlet. "I'll never answer to you," Rainier screamed. Ddraig gave a small sigh. "Then I guess we have no choice, partner, kill her," Ddraig said, his voice falling quiet. Issei then grabbed her by the throat and began to choke her. Rainier summoned a light spear in her hand and began to stab Issei's shoulder, but this did not make Issei stop. Rainier found herself losing consciousness as she let the light spear she was holding drop to the ground. Her eyes began to roll to the back of her head. Issei, deciding to stop toying with her, pressed a little harder on her throat. He finally heard that satisfying snap of her neck. Issei let go of her throat, letting her lifeless body fall to the ground. Issei gave a small sigh. He was a little disappointed that he didn't manage to get information on Kokabiel's location. He picked up his school bag and began walking the rest of the way to his house. Once arriving to his house, he dropped his bag on the floor and went upstairs to the bathroom. He grabbed a piece of cloth and the bottle of povidone. He applied some to the cloth and took his shirt off so he could disinfect his wounds. He applied the povidone on his chest, then his shoulder, then his abdomen and then his stomach. Once he was finished, he picked up 3 bandages and rolled them to where he was injured. After he was done, he went back to his room. He lied down on his bed and looked up to his ceiling. Today was somewhat of an interesting day for him. He began to wonder what other surprises were in store for him tomorrow. He decided not to think about it. As he was tired, he closed his eyes and fell into a deep slumber. Thanks for watching. Part 1 is over. If you enjoyed, please do like, share, comment and subscribe.